Have you ever wondered what possesses a group of rebels fighting for their very existence to capture a handful of peacekeepers from a distant land? It's a question that delves deep into the psyche of those embroiled in conflict, where every decision can mean the difference between life and death. That's precisely what happened in 2013 when Syrian rebels, amidst a bloody civil war, took several Filipino soldiers hostage. These peacekeepers, part of a United Nations mission, were there to provide aid and stability in a region torn apart by violence and chaos. It seems like a strange move, doesn't it? Why would rebels, who are already fighting a brutal war on multiple fronts, choose to target peacekeepers? The answer lies in the complex and often contradictory nature of war. Why target these peacekeepers, these individuals sent to help, not harm? The rebels saw the peacekeepers as symbols of international intervention, which they believed was biased against their cause. They hoped that by capturing these soldiers, they could draw global attention to their plight and perhaps gain some leverage in their struggle. The answer, like most things in the tangled web of war, is complicated. The rebels were desperate, facing overwhelming odds and limited resources. They believed that taking hostages could force the international community to take their demands seriously. It's a story of desperation, miscalculation, and the unintended consequences that can ripple outward from a single, seemingly insignificant event. The capture of the peacekeepers did not bring the desired results. Instead, it led to increased tensions and further complications in an already volatile situation. The international community condemned the act, and the rebels found themselves more isolated than ever. Eventually, through diplomatic negotiations and tense standoffs, the peacekeepers were released unharmed. But the incident left a lasting mark on the conflict, a reminder of how quickly the lines between right and wrong can blur in the fog of war. As we look back on this curious capture, we are reminded of the human cost of war and the fragile nature of peace. It's a story that underscores the importance of understanding the motivations and fears of those involved in conflict and the need for empathy and diplomacy in resolving such crises. To understand the rebels' actions, we need to delve into the context. Picture Syria in 2013, a nation fractured, engulfed in a civil war that seemed to have no end in sight. The rebels, outgunned and outmatched by the Assad regime, were grasping for any advantage they could find. Their resources were dwindling, their morale flagging. The capture of the Filipino soldiers, from their perspective, was a chance to grab the world's attention, to force the international community to finally take notice of their plight. The rebels argued that their actions were justified. They saw the Filipino soldiers, part of a UN peacekeeping force, as representatives of a global body that had failed to protect the Syrian people. In their eyes, the UN's inaction made them complicit in the Assad regime's atrocities. Taking the peacekeepers hostage, they believed, was a desperate cry for help, a way to shame the world into action. They promised the soldiers safe release in exchange for humanitarian aid and international pressure on Assad. The hostage situation sent shockwaves through the international community. Governments condemned the rebels' actions, demanding the immediate and unconditional release of the peacekeepers. The UN, caught in a difficult position, scrambled to secure the soldiers' freedom, engaging in delicate negotiations with both the rebels and the Syrian government. Public opinion, however, was more divided. While many condemned the rebels' tactics, others sympathized with their desperation. The situation highlighted the complexities of the Syrian conflict and the international community's struggle to find a solution. Section 5. A propaganda backfire. The rebels' plan to garner global sympathy backfired spectacularly. Instead of portraying themselves as desperate freedom fighters, the hostage-taking painted them as desperate and reckless. The world saw not valiant revolutionaries, but captors holding innocent peacekeepers hostage. The incident played directly into the Assad regime's narrative, allowing them to portray the rebels as terrorists and extremists. This undermined the rebels' cause, making it difficult for them to secure the international support they desperately needed. Section 6. Losing the moral high ground. The capture of the Filipino soldiers was a significant turning point in the Syrian conflict. This event marked a dramatic shift in the perception of the Syrian rebels, who had previously been seen as freedom fighters struggling against an oppressive regime. The incident eroded the moral high ground the rebels had held, casting serious doubt on their methods and objectives. The world began to see the complexity and the darker sides of the rebellion, which were previously overshadowed by their fight against the Assad regime. The global community, once sympathetic to their struggle, began to question their commitment to peace and human rights. The capture of the Filipino soldiers was not just a military maneuver, it was a moral and ethical blunder that had profound implications. This loss of moral authority had far-reaching consequences. It affected international diplomatic relations and shifted the balance of support. Countries that had been backing the rebels started to reconsider their positions, leading to a more fragmented and complicated international stance on the Syrian conflict. The erosion of the rebels' moral high ground made it easier for foreign powers to justify their support for the Assad regime. They framed their intervention as a fight against terrorism rather than a defense of a brutal dictator. This narrative shift allowed them to gain domestic and international support for their actions, further complicating the already intricate web of alliances and enmities in the region. The humanitarian crisis in Syria also worsened as a result. With the moral high ground lost, aid organizations found it increasingly difficult to operate, and the plight of civilians became even more dire. The international community's focus shifted, and the urgency to resolve the conflict waned, leaving millions of Syrians in a state of perpetual suffering. This situation in Syria serves as a stark reminder of how quickly the moral landscape can change in a conflict. It highlights the importance of maintaining ethical standards even in the most challenging circumstances. History has shown us time and again that losing the moral high ground can have devastating consequences, not just for the immediate parties involved, but for the global community as a whole. As we look to the future, the lessons from the Syrian conflict are clear. Maintaining the moral high ground is crucial for any movement seeking international support and legitimacy. The Syrian rebels' loss of this high ground serves as a cautionary tale for other conflicts around the world, emphasizing the need for a steadfast commitment to ethical principles and human rights. Section 7. The Price of Impatience. The rebels' actions also revealed a critical flaw in their strategy: impatience. In their eagerness to force the world's hand, they resorted to tactics that ultimately harmed their cause. This short-sightedness cost them dearly, both in terms of international support and on the battlefield. The hostage crisis, while resolved peacefully, left a lasting stain on the rebels' reputation. It served as a stark reminder that even in the most desperate of circumstances, the means must justify the end. Section 8. A Lesson Unlearned. The Syrian conflict is a cautionary tale, a stark reminder of the human cost of war and the unintended consequences of desperate actions. The devastation left in its wake is not just physical, but deeply emotional and psychological. Families torn apart, children growing up in the shadow of violence, and communities struggling to rebuild amidst the ruins. The images of Syrian children holding banners calling for peace are a poignant reminder of the innocence lost and the desperate yearning for a better future. The rebels' capture of the Filipino soldiers, while a small chapter in a much larger conflict, offers a valuable lesson that even in the pursuit of a just cause, the ends never justify the means. This incident highlights the complexities and moral ambiguities that often accompany armed struggles. The Filipino peacekeepers, who were there to help, found themselves entangled in a web of violence and political maneuvering. Their plight underscores the importance of diplomacy, dialogue, and the need for a comprehensive approach to conflict resolution. Have we, as a global community, truly learned from this? The international summits and UN meetings on Syria are filled with rhetoric and promises, but the ground reality often tells a different story. The voices of protesters holding signs for peace and justice echo the frustrations of many who feel that the global response has been inadequate. The question remains, are we willing to take the necessary steps to prevent such tragedies in the future, or will we continue to be mired in inaction and indecision? Or are we destined to repeat the mistakes of the past, sacrificing long-term goals for short-term gains? The historical footage of past conflicts serves as a stark reminder that history often repeats itself. The symbolic imagery of a cycle underscores the repetitive nature of human folly. As we witness ongoing conflicts around the world, the cries of protesters demanding change grow louder. It is a call to action, a plea for a collective awakening. The future depends on our ability to learn from the past and to forge a path towards lasting peace and justice. Section 9. Join the conversation. What do you think? Was the capture of the Filipino soldiers a strategic blunder or a necessary evil? Share your thoughts in the comments below and subscribe for more thought-provoking content. Keep wondering. Don't miss out on future explorations and discoveries. Hit subscribe and ring the bell to stay updated with our new content. Your journey of wonder continues with every video. Stay connected and engaged on social media. Continue the conversation, follow us. Thank you for being a part of the Have You Ever Wondered community. Keep wondering, keep discovering. Until next time.